There's a particular sound that humiliation makes. It isn't loud, it isn't violent. It's softer than that. It sounds like people laughing while you're still standing in the room. That's the sound I remember most from that night. It was my father-in-law's 70th birthday party, a big event at a rented banquet hall decorated with gold balloons and framed family photos. My wife, Sandra, had insisted we go early to help set up. I wore my best suit, the one I bought years ago when I was promoted to regional manager at the manufacturing plant. That promotion didn't last. 3 years ago, the plant downsized. I lost my job at 54 years old. Since then, I'd been working contract gigs, consulting here and there, nothing stable, nothing flashy, but enough to keep us afloat. Or so I thought. Sandra had been distant ever since I lost that job. Not cruel, not openly, but colder, more critical. She had gone back to full-time work as a real estate agent and her business had been booming. New listings, bigger commissions, nicer clothes, nicer car. I was proud of her. But pride doesn't protect you from resentment. That night, I was standing near the dessert table when I heard her voice rise above the music. "You know," she said, holding a glass of wine, "sometimes you marry for potential." A few people chuckled politely. "And sometimes," she continued, smiling sweetly, "that potential never shows up." More laughter. I froze. She didn't say my name, she didn't have to. Everyone knew I'd been unemployed. Everyone knew she was the one paying most of the bills. Then she said it. "I guess I married someone who couldn't provide." And everyone laughed. Not because it was funny, but because they thought it was safe to laugh, because she was smiling when she said it, because public humiliation disguised as humor makes people uncomfortable and laughter is easier than silence. I stood there holding a plate with a slice of cake I suddenly couldn't swallow. Our daughter Emily looked down at her phone. My brother-in-law avoided eye contact. My father-in-law shifted awkwardly in his chair. Sandra laughed too. That's what hurt the most. I didn't make a scene, I didn't confront her. I simply placed the plate down, walked to the restroom, and stared at myself in the mirror. Failure. Is that what I was? For 31 years I had worked. I had coached Little League. I had fixed broken sinks and stayed up late balancing budgets. I had paid for braces and helped with homework and stood beside her through every real estate licensing exam she failed before she passed. But in that banquet hall, I was reduced to one word. Failure. When I returned to the party, I kept my expression neutral. I even smiled when people made small talk, but something inside me had shifted. On the drive home, Sandra seemed unaware of the damage she'd done. "Oh, don't look so serious," she said lightly. "It was just a joke." I kept my eyes on the road. "Did it sound like a joke to you?" I asked quietly. She sighed dramatically. "Mark, you're too sensitive. Everyone knows you've been struggling. I was just being honest." Honest? There's honesty, and then there's cruelty disguised as truth. Over the next few weeks, I couldn't shake the image of that room laughing. It replayed in my mind constantly. I began questioning everything. Had she been speaking about me that way for years? Was this what she told her friends when I wasn't around? I started noticing small comments I had ignored before. "You wouldn't understand, you're not in the business world anymore." "I have to handle this, you're not exactly bringing in steady income." Each sentence chipped away at something I hadn't realized was fragile. One afternoon, I overheard her on the phone with a colleague. "It's exhausting being the only real provider," she said casually. Provider. That word again. I realized something uncomfortable. I had allowed my job loss to define me. I had carried quiet shame about it, and she had sensed it. But sensing someone's vulnerability doesn't give you permission to weaponize it. That night, I made a decision. Not dramatic, not loud, just clear. I stopped waiting for validation. I reached out to an old contact from my manufacturing days, a former client who had started his own logistics firm. We met for coffee. He mentioned they were expanding operations and needed someone with supply chain experience. "I didn't call you earlier because I thought you were comfortable consulting," he said. Comfortable? I wasn't comfortable, I was surviving. Within 2 months, I had secured a full-time operations director role. The salary wasn't astronomical, but it was solid, stable, respectable. I didn't tell Sandra right away. I wanted to be certain before I said anything. I wanted the offer letter in my hand. The day I signed the contract, I came home and placed the envelope on the kitchen counter. "What's this?" she asked. "Stability," I replied calmly. She opened it, scanned the letter, and her expression shifted from curiosity to surprise. "You didn't tell me you were interviewing," she said. I didn't realize I needed to announce potential, I answered evenly. She flinched slightly. For a moment, neither of us spoke. I never meant to hurt you, she said finally. But you did. That conversation was different from the one in the car weeks earlier. There was no dismissive tone this time, no laughter. I was scared, she admitted. When you lost your job, I panicked. I felt like everything was on my shoulders. I was scared too, I replied, but instead of standing beside me, you stood above me. Silence filled the kitchen. The truth is, humiliation doesn't just damage ego, it damages trust. It makes you question whether the person beside you sees you as a partner or a liability. Over the next few months, our dynamic changed, not because I suddenly earned more money, but because I stopped accepting disrespect. When she made small, critical remarks, I addressed them immediately, calmly, directly. I won't be spoken to that way. The first few times she seemed startled, as if she hadn't expected resistance, but gradually something shifted in her too. One evening, she apologized without prompting. I was wrong, she said quietly, about that night, about how I talked about you. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't tearful, but it was sincere. I realized then that sometimes people test boundaries when they sense weakness, not because they're evil, but because insecurity spreads. The banquet hall laughter still echoes occasionally in my memory, but it doesn't define me anymore. I am not a failure because I lost a job. I am not defined by one season of struggle. And more importantly, I learned something that no paycheck could teach me. Provision isn't only financial, it's emotional, it's presence, it's respect. If your spouse mocks you publicly, that's not humor, that's erosion. My wife told everyone I was a failure who couldn't provide, and everyone laughed. But the quiet part of the story is this: I stopped laughing at myself long enough to rebuild something stronger than income. I rebuilt my self-respect. And once that returned, everything else followed.